Hello everybody, my name is Matteo Mecacci, I'm the president of ICT, and we are shooting this video here today from Washington DC in preparation for our virtual Tibet Lobby Day. So this year we are forced to have a virtual Tibet Lobby Day because, as you know, the US Congress has closed access to the public until April 1st, and so we have scheduled for all of you to come here on March 23rd and 24th, next Monday and Tuesday, but we won't be able to have the in-person meeting this year, and we'll have instead to organize phone calls. So this video provides a training that we would have usually provided here in person on the Sunday before the Tibet Lobby Day, to give you the main points that we would like you to raise during the phone call with the House or Senate staffers. At this point, some of you may have already received the information, who you're going to talk to, the phone number and the time, either on Monday the 23rd or Tuesday the 24th. But if you have not, don't worry, you will receive the information before then. When you talk to them, when you call them, we would like you to make a brief introduction, which is very important, I believe. So it's important for you to say who you are, where you are coming from, if you are, in that state, you have been there in the state or in that district for a long time or not, when did you move there, and also what you do there, whether you work there, whether you are a student, whether you are a retired person. Anyway, share a little bit about your personal history, because you may talk to a staffer, sometimes it's also from the district, and so they know, they may know the university where you're studying, or the company where you work for, and so that can smoothen a little bit the beginning of the conversation. If you are a Tibetan American, and we know we have many Tibetan Americans who are going to participate in this virtual Tibet Lobby Day, share if you have a personal story, whether it's your own or of your family, coming from Tibet. What has been like, growing up in India or in the United States as a stateless person. Share those information if you have, and also, if you have been having trouble in trying to go back, or any of your, relatives going back to Tibet to visit family, or just to visit Tibet, share that with them, because according to the Reciprocal Access to Tibet Act, the US government is asking the Chinese government to allow Americans, including Tibetan Americans, to have the same access to Tibet as the Chinese people have to the United States. Okay, so after this introduction, that shouldn't be too long, don't go, even if you share your personal story, don't go more than 2 minutes, because this is a phone call, it's not an in-person meeting. We have this year, after the introduction, 3 main points that we would like you to raise. The first one is about support for the Tibetan Policy and Support Act. As you have heard, at the end of January, the House of Representatives passed overwhelmingly this legislation. So now we have to make sure that also the Senate approves it. So if you're talking to the House member, this is quite easy. You can thank them for the support that this member of Congress gave to the legislation. And so that's it, and then you can move to the second point, which will come after. But if you're talking to a member of a Senate office, a Senate staffers, there are 2 options. There could be a Senate office which has already co-sponsored the Tibetan Policy and Support Act, and actually there are 15 senators who have done so far. So if they have done that, you can thank them for that, and you can also ask them to contact the office of the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Senator from Idaho, Jim Risch, to ask him to put the Tibetan Policy and Support Act on the first business meeting of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So that will allow the Senate Foreign Relations Committee to consider and pass the legislation, and then it will move to the Senate floor. So this is the first step, if the Senate office you're talking to has already co-sponsored the bill. If they have not yet co-sponsored the bill, we would like you to talk about the content of the Tibetan Policy and Support Act. And these are 3 main points. The first one is that according to this new legislation, it will be only up to the Dalai Lama and to the Tibetan Buddhist community to determine how the succession of His Holiness the Dalai Lama will be handled. So this means that it's only up to Tibetan Buddhists and His Holiness to determine how this succession will happen, and the Chinese government has no right to interfere. If the Chinese government, its officials, interferes in the process of selecting a future Dalai Lama, the US government will consider this a serious human rights violation and will put sanctions on these Chinese officials. So this is a very important deterrent to avoid that the Chinese government does something which is absurd, which would be like having the Cuban government appointing the next pope or having the US government appointing the next leader of the Methodist Church. So this is, I think, a very simple point that everybody understands and support in the United States. The second point that we would like you to raise is about diplomatic reciprocity. And so this bill will not allow the opening of any new Chinese consulate in the US until a US consulate is allowed to open in Lhasa, in Tibet. This has been a request from the State Department for many, many years. The Chinese government has not allowed this to happen. So this is also important to allow a US consulate to be open in Lhasa. The third point is about the environment. So this bill addresses the question of the environmental degradation in Tibet, and in particular also the question of water security, which is an issue which is important not only for the Tibetan people, but for over 1 billion people across Asia, which depend on water coming from the rivers that originate in Tibet. So these are three main points that we would like you to raise about the Tibetan Policy Act: religious freedom and the succession of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the question of the opening of a new US consulate in Lhasa, and the third, addressing environmental and water security in Tibet. After explaining the content of the bill, and if you don't have any other question from the staffers, you can then ask them to co-sponsor. So this is the ask, the first ask. You ask the Senate staffers of an office which has not yet co-sponsored the bill to do it, because by increasing the number of co-sponsors, and you can tell them by increasing the number of co-sponsors, it is more likely that the Senate Foreign Relations Committee will consider this bill at their next business meeting. The second ask for the call that we would like you to raise is about the fate of Tibetan political prisoners in Tibet. According to the latest human rights report of the State Department, which just came out last week, there are still hundreds of Tibetan political prisoners in Tibet which are detained only because they were exercising their basic human and civil rights. This is unacceptable. This is something on which the US Congress has spoken up many times. So the ask to the member of Congress, whether it's a House member or a senator, is very simple. They should raise the question of Tibetan political prisoners and the human rights violations in Tibet at every opportunity when the US Congress discuss about China, whether during a hearing, in many hearings that happen in different committees on China these days, or during any interactions with Chinese officials, which can happen during diplomatic visits that sometimes the embassy of China does to members of Congress, or during other receptions or other formal meetings. Additionally, if they want, they could also raise formally with the Chinese ambassador in Washington, D.C., the fate and asking more information about the fate of Tibetan political prisoners. So if the staffer is interested, we can also provide you a list of priority cases that they could raise with the Chinese officials. The third ask is about the continuing support for Tibet-related humanitarian and development programs for Tibetans, both inside and outside of Tibet. These are programs that amount around $20 million every year. This is the level reached in the year 2020, this year. And these are programs that are funded by Congress, initiated by Congress in the mid-90s, when the first programs of scholarship exchanges or the radio services in Tibetan language of Radio Free Asia and Voice of America were established. And so these bring concrete benefit to Tibetans both inside Tibet and also to the Tibetan communities in exile in India and in Nepal. You probably know about this because many of you have also come to the United States from India or Nepal. So thank the U.S. Congress and the member of Congress for their support for this program. But the ask is very simple, is to ask them to continue to support this Tibet-related humanitarian progress for 2021 at the same level as they were in 2020. So to sum up, we have 4 things that you need to do on this phone call. First, introduce yourself, and then you have 3 main asks to them. Ask them to support or co-sponsor the Tibetan Policy and Support Act if you are with the senator, if you are talking to a Senate office, if you're talking to a House office, thank them for their support. And then the second ask is to ask them to raise the question of human rights violation and ask for the release of Tibetan political prisoners whenever Congress discusses about the situation in China or whenever they have a chance to interact with Chinese officials. And third, ask them to continue to support Tibet-related humanitarian development programs, both inside Tibet and in exile. So this is it. If they have additional questions and you don't know the answer, you can always tell them that you can get back to them and you can check with us at ICT and we'll be able to provide you that information moving forward. So this is it. I think it's an important moment in this world where it's a challenging time. It's a moment in which we can get together to try to promote positive change. And we want to thank you because Lobby Day has been going on for many years and it continues to grow thanks to the participation of many of you who want to try to put Tibet on the agenda of the US government and the US Congress. And I think this is a positive contribution that we're making to make this world a better place. So thank you very much and hope to hear from you very soon. Bye-bye.
다시들에 먼저 달로 니도 니슈 담벨로게 벽더 시도 니무게 오디 템부 니암디 겜베지 교치네 다대 잘라다 넘버 쪽에 카바 규체 슈도나야게 투즈질 유드 먼저다 로셴바타 즉 sab종제 피하데 응어스 즉 메두 단대 탈람 디 규제 즉 피하게 간주 고급디 슈 단대 캐나도 샘버너싱 슈두 니모델 넘버 쪽에 즉 샤바 규니니 즉 로글레 이메일 규니니 간다 가른 넘버 임베네 저도 투미 코난 쪽 내가 첨부 시우스이네제 개 첨부 찌기 유드 넘버 쪽 단대 달로 뭐스 페 투밀 맞어 봐 못회네 즉 염슈나로 제슈야 벽슈야디 다 슈두 니모델 달로 간주게 된다 숨지 벽슈야 돈 넘버 쪽 그뭐 슈기 된다 당부디 다 마신 비미 망체기 캥그레 니도 니슈글 다와 당변나라 초조 호메기 벼토 시주의 갑조기 팀자디 팀의 템페 넘버 차도 다디 초조 공매 다다 템페 남고 디 인도 넘버 쪽 슈두 슈베 갑라 초조 호메 팀이 임베는 디 팀자들라 갑조 넘버들 토지체 슈에 찍다 저조 공마 임베나 저조 공매는 팀이 쫑아지기 단다 다대 봐도 찍대 갑조 나요 코나존을 토지 슈야래 대 멤버이나 소중하게 팀이 찍 멤버 임베는 콘레지 갑조 나로 슈야디 내가 전부 상부지 차도 네 팀자들이 별도 찍 시주다 갑조그 팀자들이 디 낭도도 쪼디 카 가셰지요 찍디 니도 니로 표도 시주기 팀들 숙체로 당자다 니도 니슐로 이렇게 내당 즉 뜸버서투고다 디나네 쪼 찍디 표주 낭대 추 표다 표기 낭배 출로 토라 야나숑 즉 대주 마시야 네 난도도 즉 두구 문제 쳐야 돼. 다 두구 문제네. 먼저 범위 상면이 나바데 야워로 문제 군데 너림게 내주도 차도 네 토라 야나숑 티주 마시야 돼. 단대다 팀디나네 토용을 네 내가 찍으래. 니바데다 벽톨 첩시게 레구디 죽숙체를 용해 찍다 저 범위 쪽에 내든 톨을 찍시야 돈달 아메리게 슝잡 연락지 해서 주고야 돼. 내가 전부처럼 탱에 팀디나리는 슝잡 연락지 주고 있어야 줘. 다 달르디는 내려 숙체를 당자 개디니에 걔나 슝게 주머주 빈베나 대시 봐도 걔나게 슝자비알라지 아메리카 주야 매버지 딘데 차죠. 숨바디 다 벽의 고육내단 학바도 벽의 추내단 디고 다리게 팀디날직 요르 세부시버디 다 남부도 나제 소수게 룽베기 다 용세 룽베기 내단 딘고 대셰슈제 추내가 침보 근데 뭐 벽점에 뭐 점을 내가 임버데 ngo저나야디 다 교용는 건저 슈도 벽의 당부대 차죠. 다 벽의 당부도 뭐 쉬고 남부도 당부 카바도네 지금 어른한테 소수다 지금 페미사제 칸에 이메일 라소바다 딘도 대주시제 즉 표현하게 예자편 용내 된데 임바는 내다 딘도 대주게 즉 저도 투미 레지코나 저기 롤직 숙천부지 내 투야게 소야 소 투야게 베즈나로 제시한데 당은도 전제 이버디 표현하게 첩수 좀 받은 지금 말로지 용투야게 딜 꾸마다부시 즉 나야 내가 전부 머시 로다리싱도 수도 님을 즉 표현 첩수 좀 받고나 로로 고여서야 돼 지금 먼저 수고를 단대디 배나 군수 벤지름 버지 줘 버지 되네야 땡사 안조 즉 표기 돌 리그뱅에 다시 온줄라서 콘주기 다 저병은 첩수 좀 망부지 단대 자나게 정거 완료 콘돌로지 용에 디 부구슈야지 군주 토슌로 서버된 가지고 캐나도 익제 유니 피야직 차대 숨버디 로다 리시 아메리카 슝네 즉 표치난 이게 된다래 즉 프로그램 더블에 주릉 레지 토르된데 라서버 즉 롱우 편첨 사야 망보시는 거다 된주 저도 투미 군주 유니 즉 로다 리시 템뱀나제 차대거든 이제 달로 인해 니도다 이슈저지 르게 지난 일 갑조나야기 롱우딘도 못했는 나로 제스 보고 쉬어들다 니 니즈 개바데 가지고 캐나톨지 이gram 주는 바 피하다 디체디 슈기 다 된도 돈다 숨데다 캐나조 쉬야 차르도 당부디 표토 시주다 직갑조 팀일 직갑조나야 직 니버도 범위 첩시 좀 받죠 러주 용하다지 숨버디 표토를 즉 로롱 그 로무디 못해 나로치 다 된조 남부도 수단디 소수의 계획 냠뇨 돈에 즉 가리 이면에 된데나 토에 즉다 대 셰바톤 유니 미자 코나졸식 아니 거면난 제베젤 제일 양제 제대치하게 로 컨데스 고금에 된조 바 보고 쉬어 디 내도 디 톨키 계시 세부 뭐 좀은 안졸리고 못해 되고 나오나 토지체나.
Hi, I'm Congressman Jim McGovern from Massachusetts. I serve as chairman of the Congressional Executive Commission on China, and I co-chair the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission. On March 23rd and 24th, Tibetan Americans and Tibet supporters from across the United States are coming to Washington, D.C. to participate in Tibet Lobby Day, which is organized by the International Campaign for Tibet and other groups. This important advocacy event, which started back in 2008, is an opportunity for you to tell your elected representatives in Washington that you want them to stand up for Tibet. In recent years, we've seen the power of citizen advocates working together to help the Tibetan people. The Reciprocal Access to Tibet Act, which I introduced, was overwhelmingly passed by Congress and signed by the President in 2018. Just a few weeks ago, the House of Representatives approved the Tibetan Policy and Support Act, new legislation that I authored to strengthen U.S. support for the Tibetan people in their struggle for human rights, religious freedom, and genuine autonomy. The human rights situation in Tibet is worsening, with observers stating that the isolation of Tibet is as bad as North Korea, allowing human rights abuses and environmental degradation to be concealed from the outside world. The Tibetan Policy and Support Act will authorize sanctions on Chinese officials who interfere in the reincarnation and selection of Tibetan Buddhist leaders, including a future Dalai Lama. The legislation will also prevent the Chinese government from opening any more consulates in the United States until a U.S. consulate in Lhasa is established. Now it's time to get the bill passed in the Senate, and that's why we need your help on Tibet Lobby Day. So thank you, and Tashi Delek.
Hello, I'm Marco Rubio. I'm proud to represent the great state of Florida in the United States Senate. I want to take a moment to discuss the important cause of Tibet. At the end of March, many of you will come to Washington, D.C. to talk to your respective members of Congress with regard to Tibet and the Tibetan people. And this is an important opportunity to let your voice be heard for so many Tibetans suffering at the hands of the brutal Chinese Communist Party. At a time when the Chinese government and Communist Party is increasing its repression of the Tibetan people, we must stand together to protect the Tibetan religion, language, and culture, both inside and outside of Tibet. Last year, Senator Ben Cardin and I introduced the Tibetan Policy and Support Act to update U.S. policy towards Tibet amid new challenges posed by the Chinese Communist Party. That bill passed in the House in January, and it's now being reviewed here in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, of which I'm a member. And I look forward to ensuring that that bill passes the Senate and heads to the President's desk to become law. But I just want to thank you for your advocacy in support of the Tibetan people and in support of this very important piece of legislation.